Good day, everyone. Meteorologist Mark Molnar here. Hope everybody is doing well. Well, guess what? The tropics are relentless here. We have our next system that has a 60% chance plus of development through day 7 here. So that's talking like the 29th, 30th, 31st of August into the 1st of September. It is actually in the Pacific side, the Eastern Pacific. This system is forecast to cross over Central America and right on into the Western Caribbean, likely becoming a tropical storm in the Eastern Gulf and eventually potentially a hurricane. Does it have Florida in its sights? We'll take a look here. And we're also still tracking Tropical Storm Franklin, likely to become a hurricane shortly. What will its effects be on Bermuda, the U.S. East Coast, and eventually Nova Scotia and Southeast Canada? We'll get into all the details. We have a lot more areas in the tropics, in the Atlantic, the Eastern Pacific, and a few areas here into the Western Pacific as well. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off with our potential for our Caribbean system here. Take a look at this. This is going to be the Pacific side system that transitions across Central America, just south of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, these areas. And this system is essentially going to push to the north here. So as we head on Friday into Saturday here, the weekend, look at that heavy rain pushing north towards Cancun, Cozumel. If you have a vacation planned, it is going to possibly be ruined. Now, let me zoom out here because the moisture plume is going to go as far east as Jamaica and the Cayman Islands here. So watch out. I'll go into those rainfall amounts momentarily here. It is going to be interesting to see how this evolves because look how it just hangs out here the 26th, the 27th. Really starts to get its act together around Cancun and Cozumel. It just likes to, at this point, hang out here for just a tad as the steering currents. It doesn't really have anything to steer it at this point, but watch as this trough here in the eastern part of the United States. Let me just zoom out just a tad here. Here's Franklin over here. I'm going to talk about that storm momentarily, so stay tuned for that. Look at how this really gets going on the 28th, likely becoming a tropical storm by then, and look at this. Yeah, I'm pretty confident now this thing could potentially strengthen into a hurricane. And here is the west coast of Florida, the Florida Keys, all the way up the west coast to the Panhandle. Everybody even over to New Orleans. You should be watching this system as we approach the weekend into the early to middle part of next week. This is going to be a potential hurricane. You can see the eastern eye wall puts Tampa right on the east side here, but you do know these systems, as they're strengthening as they come into the coast, they tend to come in a bit further to the south than the actual projected track. So we're going to keep an eye on that. That's trends we need to keep a lookout for. But we're looking for this trend of this hurricane, potential hurricane. And look how it just exits Florida here towards the 31st and potentially giving hurricane conditions to the parts of the Outer Banks of North Carolina here. So yeah, this is going to continue to become a thing. By this point, it looks like high pressure is building across the Northeast, so that keeps it on a trajectory out to sea. If that high pressure wasn't there, or if it was further to the east, it might bend it back up towards the coast here. So that's something we need to keep an eye on as well. This is 186 hours out on this when you get back out into the Atlantic here, and it looks like it starts. Yeah, look what starts to happen here. This was what I was afraid of. Look how high pressure starts to build back. You know, it moves to the east and it starts to build a little bit back towards the west here. And look what it starts to do. This system starts to slow down around September 1st. And look at this. It does eventually take it back out to sea, but that's a little bit disturbing and troubling. So that's a trend we're going to have to keep an eye on out here. And look what in the wake behind this storm. Look at this big tropical moisture plume headed north. That's another thing we're going to have to look at towards September 3rd. Now, as we start off here with Franklin, our second main area of concern, this is likely to become a hurricane, most likely. It's looking like right around nightfall Friday night. So Category 1 hurricane. You see, guidance takes us up to 110 mile per hour winds. It may actually achieve major hurricane strength. So let's see how quickly this moves to the north towards the 27th. We get into our weekend here, Sunday into Monday. Now, it's slowing down a little bit here. That's interesting to note because the steering currents, once this trough kicks out to the northeast, and it allows this system to bend more towards the west as high pressure subtropical high builds in. In the wake of that trough, it's going to bend it back towards the west, and that may be the one saving grace here for Bermuda. Here is Bermuda. You're still in that red cone of uncertainty, so please stay tuned. Any slight deviation of track to the east could cause you to get some major readjustments here, but it looks like at the moment, look what's happening by the 29th here. You get this trough of low pressure right around Delmarva here. That's going to be moving to the northeast, and that's going to help kick this system out to the northeast. How close is this going to come to Nova Scotia? So let's get a good bird's eye view here. Let's see what happens with this storm. And as we continue to go in time, here's the 30th at 8 a.m. It is safely, for the most part, staying offshore here. It's going to be really close, though. Look at this thing. Yeah, it's going to be very close to Nova Scotia by this point on the 30th here, according to our European model. And that's going to continue towards... Now, here's the problem. If you're in Sydney, in these areas, in eastern part of Nova Scotia, the European model now has the western part of the eye wall affecting you. And by this point, look how it pushes right into Newfoundland. This was basically a given. It essentially, at this point, is combining with a low-pressure system to the north. So this might eventually conglomerate into one of those super extratropical storms that nobody wants to be around. So look what's coming up from the south here, our Gulf Coast hurricane. It wants to go in the same direction there. And then we have another system coming in from the east here. Look at this. Yeah, we have a few areas of development here we're going to be watching out here in the Atlantic. We have Invest 92 out here, L. And look at out here towards September 3rd. There is a massive tropical wave. Look at that thing out there by the Cape Verde Islands. I think the tropics, as we near peak hurricane season, is going to really start going crazy here. And we're going to have to really keep an eye on this. Let's take a look at the GFS. So if we take a look at the GFS here, this is interesting because most of the model runs here have been showing that our Gulf system, our Caribbean system that's crossing over from the Pacific, is not looking as impressive. But this model run takes it a little bit stronger here. So the GFS is slowly catching up to the European model. This is the 28th at 11 a.m. You see you got a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity in the Cayman Islands. Not too much over here in Jamaica. But watch as we continue in time here. This thing's really going to start to blossom. Even showers and thunderstorms as far east as Jamaica. Heavy rain across the Cayman Islands back towards Cancun and Cozumel here. This system continues to push towards the north. Now, the weird thing is here, you see this trough. It's moving faster on the GFS. Very interesting here because that kind of squishes this system on this model into an elongated area of low pressure. And it almost looks like it's just stripping it of its tropical moisture. And then it essentially moves on to the northeast with very little fanfare across Florida. But I caution you, this model's been very inconsistent. And the European model's been very consistent with our Pacific storm crossing over the way it is. Now, let's see what it does with Franklin here. Let's just go zoom out a little bit. So we're going to start from the very beginning here. So here it is, Franklin. Let's see how fast the GFS intensifies this. So let me zoom out just a tad. There we go. So there's Hamilton, Bermuda there. So let's see how close the GFS has been taking this storm much closer to Bermuda. But the great news is the GFS is actually just slightly west of guidance here because it's showing, you know, that this high pressure is a bit further to the west than the European model is showing, pushing the storm initially, you know, towards the left here, towards the west. So that's great news for Bermuda. It's looking like this storm might actually steer around Bermuda, but stay tuned, you know, things can change. But here's that next trough here on the GFS, helping to push this system towards the northeast. Now, do we safely exit it away from the New England area, Nova Scotia? It looks like for the most part, the GFS is taking this further east than the European model. So that is great news. You get some heavy rain and wind here across parts of Nova Scotia. Definitely some heavy rain and gusty winds, but it doesn't look like you're going to get a direct hit from this. Now, if you're in eastern Nova Scotia, stay tuned because you might have some hurricane conditions. But it doesn't look like there's going to be direct landfall. Now, the GFS is a bit more forgiving here than the European model, as it doesn't show it combining fully with the low to the west. And it has the system kind of sliding to the southeast part of Newfoundland here. So that kind of cruises it towards the northeast here, and it combines it with that trough, not the actual area of low pressure behind it. And then the intertropical convergence zone really starts to ramp up here again out into the main development region and Cape Verde region of the Atlantic. And as we continue in time here, let me just go back, see if there's anything in the Gulf. Nothing really to be had there. So as we continue to go in time here, take a look at this. We have a common theme developing here on the GFS. The Gulf of Mexico definitely opening up for business here. Look at this. Tropical wave here along the Texas coast. Steady stream of tropical moisture continuing here across Florida. Yeah, we could see quite a bit in the way of activity as we continue in time here. And the intertropical convergence zone really heating up out here. So please stay tuned. So let's take a look at the dry air analysis at mid layers here. We're not seeing any dry air problems there in the Caribbean and the southern Gulf initially here. So there's our system crossing over from the Pacific. Here's Franklin. We got a few other tropical waves out here. Lots of dry air at mid layers out here in the MDR. Franklin isn't going to really be battling too much dry air here. Neither is our system here into the Western Caribbean. Take a look at that. This is thanks to Tropical Tidbits, by the way. And look at this as we continue to go in time towards the 28th. You see the 29th. Our eastern Gulf of Mexico system does pretty much get all that dry air out of its circulation. So does Franklin, except on the southern side here. We have a few other systems and tropical moisture surges. Look at that. The Caribbean stays pretty moist as well as we head towards the end of August here. There it is, making landfall in Florida, 989 millibars, 990, 991. So yeah, this thing could be, a hurricane. At this point in the game, I'm not expecting a major hurricane, but the problem is there is extremely high sea surface temperatures there in the eastern Gulf. So we have to keep an eye on that. But look at this. As we go in time, there's that high pressure system kind of pushing and keeping that storm. There it is, September 1st, before retreating to the northeast, 979 millibars. Here's another potential hurricane just to its east. So yeah, look at that. They might start to dance around each other here on the west end of the subtropical high. So this is September 3rd. We're definitely going to have to keep an eye on this possibility. And another moisture surge from the Caribbean out to the Cape Verde Islands by the 3rd of September. Here's what I'm worried about with our Gulf system once it gets into the Gulf. Look at that 1 to as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius. Some areas closer to 3 degrees Celsius above average. That is pretty significant all the way up the East Coast as well. Look at the MDR region. This is remarkable. 3, 3.5, 4, sometimes 5. That is crazy. So if we can get rid of some of this dry air and wind shear, things would really blow up in a way we've never seen in quite some time. So as we get into the central and western part of the Caribbean, look at this. So it's mostly dry from Jamaica up to the Cayman Islands until you get to the middle part of the weekend. You start to pile up the rain, and then our big system that ejects out of the Pacific here across Central America. Lots of heavy rain on the order of 80 to as much as 120 millimeters here. Places like Honduras and Nicaragua up to Belize here. And then eventually Cozumel, and then into the western tip of Cuba. Cayman Islands, so these areas, you're going to see anywhere from 2.5 to as much as 8 inches of rain. Locally higher, I would expect closer to a foot of rain. But look at here into the Cayman Islands and Jamaica. You're going to be looking at a solid 70 to 100 millimeters. You're typically talking here about 2.5, 3.5 plus inches of rain. So some good rain here for you as well. So look at the Lesser Antilles here. Puerto Rico is pretty dry for the most part until you get into a little bit next week where you pile on about 40 to 60 millimeters. That'll be about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. But look at here. Yeah, the intertropical convergence zone really spiraling up by the first week of September. We get to these totals closer to 100 millimeters. You're getting a solid 3.5 to 4.5 inches of rain. In the Eastern Pacific, we have two major areas here, 70 to 80% chance. So let's see if any land is going to be affected by these. So as we get going into the 26th, the 27th, 28th, it looks like this first system is kind of having a hard time getting started here. So, yeah, it does eventually get started a little bit, but I don't know. It's not looking as impressive as it was. Let me just back up there. So, yeah, it does kind of parallel the coast a little bit. It's probably either a depression or a storm. So nothing really to write home about there. And as we continue with this system out in the Pacific, let's see if it actually affects the Hawaiian Islands here. It definitely looks like it could. Look at that area of high pressure to the north. As we go towards September 1st, it looks like it approaches it as either a tropical depression or a tropical storm. So potentially we might have some trouble here in the Hawaiian Islands. It would bring some rainfall, which you do need some rainfall. So that's some good news. As we go out here to the Western Pacific, well, let's take a look at this. So what do we have here? We have Tropical Depression 8, and then we have our storm out over here that really does not know what it wants to do. Tropical Storm Saola. This isn't going to be an interesting one. This one looks like it's going to miss Japan, so that's great news. No typhoon. But northern Philippines, please stay tuned. Look at this system likely to become a typhoon. How strong could this get? Well, we're looking on the order of 125 mile per hour winds before it does. Look at that, 140. So that is by the 29th. So this could be a very formidable system that causes intense problems here into the northern Philippines. So here we go. Here is Taiwan. Right up here. Here's the northern part of the Philippine Islands. Here's the southern Japanese islands. This is going to become a major thing, and look how it just kind of hangs out here. This is terrible news. It's interesting, though. The European model is taking this east of guidance, well east of guidance. So what exactly is going on here, essentially, is you got an area of low pressure to the east here that's helping kind of steer the system a little bit. And, you know, we don't have any major troughs unless you go way up here into South Korea and Japan. So this is going to be interesting. I think the steering currents are so weak that this system could potentially go any direction. The European now wanting to take it up towards Taiwan. Look at this. This could be a real mess. And, of course, the European takes it right into Taiwan. That's terrible. And then eventually heads it towards China here. So look at this. What is this? Look at this. By September 2nd. Yeah, this is far out, but this could be a extremely major typhoon here. Look at this, heading towards the South Japanese Islands. So definitely something we gotta keep an eye on here. Northern Philippines, Taiwan, China, and then eventually Japan. Lots of activity. So as we take a look at our system, yeah, this is going to be quite a thing here. Tropical Storm Saola. Watch how it goes towards the northern Philippines here on the GFS. So we got two. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is going to potentially become a major issue. And the GFS also taking it a little bit east of guidance here. The only good news is that I see so far it's taking it mostly away from these populated areas in the north. But look at this. This eventually does take it towards Taiwan as well. A little bit more indirectly. And then eventually towards China. So these same areas that were hit like a couple weeks ago. So that's really bad news. Our next typhoon developing here just the same as it was on the European model. Heading towards the north. The GFS does pick it up in a trough though. You know, you see this trough to the north here. Helping to pick this system up. Just the tail end of it is good enough to actually recurve. But, you know, this is pretty far out, so a lot can change with this. Please stay tuned. As we go to the Eastern Pacific on the GFS, how about our storm that really didn't show up much here on the European model? It does show up a little bit more readily here on the GFS, heading up along places like Acapulco, Puerto Vallarta here. But very little fanfare. It's not going to be anything like Hillary was. So if we take a look at our HRRR future radar, I really wanted to show this to you because you can get a really good sense of what's going on here with some of our severe weather and flash flooding. I take you to the hardest hit area, Michigan and Ohio. And look, as we head overnight, we're going to have another major thunderstorm complex here moving across Michigan, damaging wind, large hail potential, and flash flooding. Look at how it heads across Lake Erie. This is essentially the ring of fire around our heat dome out in the Midwest and the South Central Plains. Look at this as we head towards after midnight. A major thunderstorm line approaching Cleveland down to Mansfield, Erie, Pennsylvania, Akron. Look at this. This could be pretty big, and heavy rains and some stronger thunderstorms breaking out from the Finger Lakes down to Olean, New York as well. Watch this as we continue. This becomes a solid mesoscale convective system with widespread severe weather, flash flooding issues all the way over to Binghamton, New York, some heavy rain. Look at this as we continue in time. We could be looking at quite a bit in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity. Yeah, this looks like a bow echo forming as well. Lots of strong thunderstorms moving through the Pittsburgh area. And look at this, by 4 a.m., redevelopment, back building here across Akron over to Toledo here. Yeah, this could be looking pretty nasty as we continue in time. So that continues, and it does start to weaken through Harrisburg, Allentown, and Newark here through the early morning hours and sunrise before moving off the New Jersey coast. And you see showers and thunderstorms up into New England. So, yeah, there it is. Just go through the whole thing. That's a big barreling line of storms to the north here into the Catskills and northern Poconos and southern Hudson Valley. You get more of a stratiform rain, so a steady rain. So that's kind of nice. And look at that as we continue on into the day Friday. Yeah, more showers and thunderstorms form behind it. Look at this. I finally see some clear weather here for Ohio after receiving, some of you, a month's worth of rain in just a couple days. Look at that. We get some shower and thunderstorm activity 9 p.m. on Friday here into parts of the Northeast. That pivoting out of the region. I think you'll eke out a pretty nice weekend here across the Northeast, with the exception of northern New York and northern New England. As we get into Saturday, you still get some instability up here into parts of northern New England. How about the rest of the nation here? We're not looking too bad here across the South either. Showers and thunderstorms scattered across Florida in these areas, but nothing too terribly bad to write home about. Precipitation amounts here across the area. Yeah, this is the area you're going to be looking at quite a bit in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity. The Ohio Valley, parts of the eastern Great Lakes, Michigan, and look at up here. Look at that. Most of that falling, look at that, Friday into Saturday. And then another surge there into Sunday night and Monday. And then look at this. This surge here is our potential hurricane in the eastern Gulf, crossing Florida and then exiting here towards the Carolinas here. So here's our liquid equivalent precipitation amounts. Another 1 to 2 inches possibly around the Cleveland area, north central Ohio. Look at that as we cross New York and Pennsylvania into Thursday night and Friday. Look at this. Probably some areas approaching 1 to 2, maybe as much as 3 inches in some of these red areas. So definitely something we need to keep an eye on, as a lot of convection is on its way. And look at that, as we head into Monday and Tuesday, we just pile more rain on top of that. That is pretty interesting with that trough that's forecast to eventually kick our Gulf Coast hurricane that tries to move up the East Coast. Take a look at that. I am proud to announce that I am now an affiliate with Trilogy Maps. TrilogyMaps.com, bringing you the most digital, customizable maps found nowhere else on the internet. These maps are simply stunning. It's an advanced layering system that makes these maps great for making forecast maps with ease, or any other maps that you would like to display important information on. The resolution on these maps is simply amazing. From the detail of everything here in the States, and you can also create stunning, digital, professional layered maps from also across the entire world. And don't forget, in checkout, the discount code option, use my code, MeteoMark, hit apply, and you will get 20% off your order. So if you want the most professional, customizable, and affordable weather maps found nowhere else on the internet, look no further than TrilogyMaps.com. Link in the description down below along with your discount code. As always, thanks for joining me for this edition of MeteoMark's Weather. Take a look at my Facebook page at MeteoMark, also Weather Northeastern, also Hurricane Northeastern to follow the tropics. And if you want to hop over to my Twitter page, it's at Weather Eastern. It's MeteoMark.com. Thanks for joining me. Question or comment down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell notification button so you're alerted when a video comes out.